Well, welcome back, Reed. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And it's more than a podcast. This is hopefully a time of encouragement. Usually on a podcast, it's tied to a program, but we're actually not doing a program. We are doing a series, you and me, father and son, which is kind of fun. So, welcome back. We're doing part two. We're picking up where we left off. So, thank you for making time. You're a busy dad.
No problem. And I'm glad we were finally able to figure out a time. And I know it's been a bit of a challenge because of exactly that, being a dad, but I'm
Yeah.
glad we were able to.
So I'm glad. And we started part one. If anybody's just joining us, there is a part one. We called it Encouragement for Dads for Father's Day. Probably just going to call this Encouragement for Dads because Father's Day was, I think, 2 weeks ago or whatever day it was, right? So hopefully this will be helpful. We got a lot of good feedback, some neat voicemails, but also if people want to go on part one, they can see the comments. So that was nice. And I think people, especially dads, especially new dads, and that's sort of the target audience. So it's a privilege for me to be able to do this with you, my son.
Yeah, and same for me, doing it. It's quite something being able to do it with you as my dad.
Yeah, long overdue, kind of what I said on the first episode. So, well, we'll get into this. On part one, we covered the characteristics of a good dad, and we used the idea of the Boy Scout law. So, if anybody's familiar, at least in the States, I don't know what they have in the equivalent in Canada. Do they have? I don't even know. Okay, but in the States,
They might have the same just because, at least for Girl Scouts, for example, they have. I know they have Girl Scouts up here, so it might just be Boy Scouts Canada, something.
okay,
That's all, almost always they'll like they have McDonald's Canada, right? So it might
okay.
just be as simple as that.
Well, that's good. Then more people will know what we referenced. So in Boy Scouting, they have what's called the Scout Law, and there are characteristics, and so that one of the scouts or a scout needs to memorize. So a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind. I can't believe I still remember this. Courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. So we went through those characteristics to encourage dads. We all need help upping our game, but we also need encouragement. So that's what we went through. And we left off because we ran out of time, but we have a lot to cover. Um, and Reed, you're good enough. You don't know what I'm going to be bringing up, so I figured this would be kind of a fun thing to go through, walk through memory lane for you. So what we started with was my title page, and it just kind of shows the progression of a family. And so there we are. Started with one child, that would be your sister, of course, and then Lane, and then look how quickly time flies. So we did cover those are the characteristics, and so I recommend people go back to part one. So I thought what we would do is pick up here in part two, and I'm going to cover them. And let me see if yes, okay, I'm going to, animation. Let me see if no. That would be, everybody bear with me here, slideshow. I may have numbered these. Continue to share. Yes, we'll continue to share. Now, what happened here? Let me go through this quickly. Okay, well, everybody bear with me here. Okay, those are all the characteristics that we went through. Okay, and I mentioned to everybody, I just Googled positive traits of a good dad. And so it's kind of well, these are good traits as well. So if any dad wants to know, okay, what what should I focus on? The AI brought this up. So compassion, dependability. He challenges his kids, role model, empathic. We'll just go through this fast. Encouraging, good listener, honesty, love, patience, flexibility. He's protective. We talked about that last time. Good dad gets the spiders, but you have compassion, right? So you help them outside. I squish them. He spends time with his kids. Leadership, leading by example, playfulness, protecting, selflessness, and conditional love. A good father respects his partner. A wall of trust and security. That's a good way to put it. Active listening, adaptability. Okay. Well,
Mm,
I didn't do one by one, so I'll just jump into this. Let's read what
mm,
we decided, you and I, off camera or between the week. During the week was I would just kind of share what I gained, but you were good enough to already do a video for me, so I made life easy on you. And we'll just kind of let your own video, why reinvent the wheel? So I'll kind of go first from my own experience, and then we'll hear from you, and we'll let you add if you want to. So, these are some things that I gained from my dad. Now, as I had mentioned before, my dad was very, very uninvolved. He never went to any of my activities. He was just into himself. But the question is, was I still able to gain anything from him? So I tend to be fairly optimistic. Why? Because, and really the thing for dads that I think I want them to get, and read my guess is this is the reason why we're doing this, is values are not so much taught but caught. And there is
okay.
something about the ebb and flow, the wharf and woof, the feel of a family. So I would say as goes dad, but also as goes mom. So as goes both parents, because all it takes is for one parent to kind of be a little selfish, and that's going to change the feel of the family. Before you know it, everybody's walking on eggshells, and that's not a healthy thing, right? But this
Uh-huh.
is, are there things that we can do as dads that little by little the kids are going to absorb, whether they even are thinking about it or not? So here's some of the things I gained from my dad, even though he was very self absorbed. Okay, a sense of optimism.
Mm.
Again, I didn't even know I was getting this from my dad. I'm sorry, Reed, were you going to say something?
No, I was just listening to what you were saying there, but I was thinking as you were talking, um, it's interesting that maybe it's for the purpose of the podcast because it's more encouraging fathers. Um, Also, that we're not mentioning the negative side of things, um, for for better or worse, because obviously there are lots of negative things as well that you could get from your dad, um, and especially in your situation because you mentioned he was uh, very uninvolved. But I think I can say from experience that you put a lot of effort in to be involved. So maybe um, I guess you try to almost counter, you gotta
Must
be the
overcompensate.
opposite.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there are some dads, me in the field of counseling, and people probably know others who really were victimized by perpetrators who were a parent. And so, for those people that are listening, the challenge is not to um, ignore the impact because there are some parents, there are some dads, a lot of times it's dads, they're just flat out evil. And so I don't want survivors, if they're listening to this, to suddenly feel guilty that they're not trying to look on the bright side, right? So we have to be realistic. But again, the question is, if we're dealing with dads within the bell-shaped curve, so to speak, did we get anything positive so that we can acknowledge that and then also build upon that? So the first, the one thing that I got was a sense of optimism. I never saw my dad depressed. Now, again, probably because he was into himself, but that it really gave me a sense of um, always looking on the bright side, so to speak. Or when things don't go well, how can we turn it around? A lot of problem solving. So I saw him as a really good problem solver. So we were never stuck as a family, so to speak, regardless of what was going on. So there's tomorrow's going to be a new day, so to speak. So I think I gained that from him, a sense of personal responsibility. I think I'd mentioned actually that fits into the next one too. A lack of knowing that you could call in sick. I remember I did not like school whatsoever. My dad was into school, and he really impressed that upon us. As a matter of fact, almost to a fault. Um, I think through that, I gained a sense of responsibility that no matter what was going on in school, that I needed to show up and I needed to always catch the bus. And I remember the first time, I think it was third grade, that I was running late. Now, Reed, you and your sister and brother, you never really had that experience of having to go out and catch the bus, either for
Yeah.
better or for worse. But I remember the first time I missed the bus, Yeah, and that's when I realized it was inside of me because my mom, your grandmother, tried to calm me down. I was saying, but I missed the bus. She said, I can drive you. I hadn't put two and two together. So,
Oh yeah.
right? So I guess, oh, okay.
Especially
I ran
especially
out of
as a
my
kid.
socks. I ran out, bless my little heart, I ran out of my socks and it was raining.
Oh,
But isn't that interesting? Nobody told me I needed to catch the bus. It was always something that I think I gained that from my dad. And so, what does that look like? Let's say as an adult, I didn't know you could call off sick. You know, a lot of people play hooky, hooky from school, hooky from work. They take a sick day. Now, it's legitimate if you are sick. That's what sick days are for. But how many people do we know that call out sick and they're out fishing or doing whatever? So again, I benefited that. Just a sense of responsibility that you got to show up. The
and I
importance,
think
yeah,
just a quick comment on that one with the sick days. I think that is a tough one because um, I think of more now as an adult. Of course, you have sick days for work, which I think is what you were referring to there. Um, and I find I'm, yeah, I'm the opposite where I um, hardly ever use my sick days, even when I am sick. Which I
right.
think, you have people on both sides of the spectrum, of course, but it is a tough one trying to once you have that attitude with the not using the sick days, being like, okay, I need to actually use one.
Good for
You
you.
know,
That's right. We can push
it's fun.
ourselves too hard. That's right. So we need to have a balance. That's where if we have somebody in our life that can help us with balance, that's good. Because if we will deny ourselves to such an extent, then we don't even know that we're running ourselves down. So
Mm.
that's a good point. Well, there you go. I just looked at the next bullet point, so I already referenced that. So, a love of history. My dad was very engaging. I always enjoyed listening to him. Now, some people say my dad always talked. Okay. But because he was so engaging, he made history and politics, quite frankly, very engaging. Um, I do have to laugh. A lot of people say, "Oh, your dad, all he ever talked about was," but I actually enjoyed it. So I got a good education on history. And if anybody doesn't like history, it probably comes down to the teacher, by the way, right?
Mm.
So if you, and that's probably true with any subject, right? If you love it, if you're enthusiastic, people will catch that, and it's engaging. Read any thoughts on that? Because I know you're in scaffolding, and you have had to take a lot of classes. You've probably seen different instructors that you know that are either boring or engaging.
Yeah, that's true. Well, actually, I've had the same instructor for all of my scaffolding courses, but he is, I'd say he does pretty good job. Um, yeah, I think you can only make boring material so
I was
exciting,
going to say, like
but
math.
I've, I have taken a fair, a good variety of different courses, just not specifically in scaffolding, even just fall protection, or I did some firefighting courses, and so different ones. And yeah, I think it's very much about the instructor, because there was this one course I did. It was related to scaffolding, but it was for I think to work in refineries, like in oil refineries. And the content was extremely boring because it was just about molecules and all this. And they just had a bunch of PowerPoints basically. But yeah, the instructor talked about personal experience, and he had so many stories to share. So yeah, he actually made it probably the most interesting course that I'd been a part of, even though the content itself was quite dry at times.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, number one, the importance of any instructor to be engaging. But if a parent loves something, then it tends to be a little bit easier for the child to automatically enjoy that. What's next? And understanding how government works. I've referenced that. I remember a lot of my classmates in high school and even in college um, not enjoying political science. But for me, it was just, again, I was raised that way. An appreciation for patriotism. Um, That was something that was very important to my dad, and we learned respect. We learned respect and appreciation for those that served and those that gave the ultimate, um, the ultimate sacrifice. Reed, let me ask this. Hey, this is supposed to be mine, but let me ask. Um, I know. I guess I tried to instill that. What are your thoughts about that? Because I remember right next door to our place, we had a retirement home. And it was very neat that they would bring in veterans on some of the different days, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Veterans Day, at least down in the States. And do you remember that? They would have a bugle corps.
Absolutely. Yeah, that I think it's tough to forget that, especially since it was every year. I remember I think I remember going over there, even though it was
Mhm.
right across, right across from
We
our
would
house.
go
I
over.
remember
That's
going
right.
over there sometimes as well, and I think there were sometimes when we didn't have the chance that we'd just watch from the window because we could actually see right in there. And yeah, I think I really I enjoyed watching the ceremony, especially with, as a kid, especially you're waiting for them to fire the blanks into the air, as part of the ceremony. Um, yeah, I think that really made it memorable, and it's even though obviously as a kid you might not have the full appreciation for what a soldier goes through and what the veterans went through. I think you have the general idea, like okay, this these gentlemen have been through a lot, and they have a lot of experience in that regard. So I think that does help to instill that patriotism aspect. And actually, it's quite appropriate that you have patriotism on the list because I don't know if there's a holiday in the States coming up shortly, but here on Tuesday, it's Canada Day as well. So
You've lived in
it's quite.
Canada too long. Yes, we have the 4th of July, right?
Oh, there, yeah, of course. That's very true,
For
actually.
being a dual citizen. So yes, that's right. Canada
Yeah,
celebrates
that's
Canada
actually quite
Day on
funny.
the 2nd and July 4th down here in the States. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I have
Independence Day.
sometimes a terrible memory when it comes to like all the holidays besides Christmas and
Oh,
the really big ones. So yeah,
that's
no,
right.
yeah, absolutely.
That's right. Yeah, but at that retirement home, so it was really neat. We were literally on the property line. We were next door. We were in the second story. Um, So we rented. So we were in the second floor and we could look down on when we couldn't be over there. But they would hold the ceremony out front. They had a large flagpole and it was very neat. They would bring in a color guard. Different retired personnel would come in and the widows, it was usually the widows that they would bring out, but those that had served. And so those that were actually residents of the retirement home, they would bring out. And so I took you guys over. We would stand there, and they were also very encouraged. And I kind of wanted to do that, help you guys see how good it can be to encourage others. And so I remember you guys would engage the um, the older folks, and a number of them in wheelchairs, and you could tell a number of them had husbands that had passed away. Or had died in the war. I remember we met a widow of someone that died in Pearl Harbor. So it was just very neat to be able to be an encouragement to them and then to hear a little bit from them. And I think it touched them that I would come over with my kids. And so there we are. And there we were. And we would stand and pledge allegiance. So that, to the flag. So that was a good time.
That's actually quite something because I actually didn't remember. Maybe as a kid I knew about the widows, but I didn't actually know that there were widows there as well. 'Cause I remember the veterans because they would fire the blanks and that.
Yeah.
Glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. So they arrived to do that for the residents and for the widows as well.
Huh.
So. Okay, the importance of military sacrifice. We just spoke to that. The importance of individual liberty. I gained that from my dad. That
Mm.
affects everything from political theory, how you see the world, as well as how you vote, right? So if you don't understand about individual liberty, you'll be okay with others making decisions for you. And before you know it, a country can slide into socialism. But along with individual liberty goes individual responsibility. So those two things are tied. But I gained that from my dad
Hmm.
and understanding political theory. Well, there you go. I just referenced that. I should be reading the bullet point ahead. A lack of prejudice. There was quite something out in California. I didn't run into a lot of prejudice. Now, I spent, and you all spent your early days in Southern California, but I spent 20 years, and at the end, you guys were born. There's pockets of that South Central, but still, it was very interesting. Coming out east is when I experienced prejudice. Very interesting. Everything from prejudice against outsiders. I often, when moving to Pennsylvania, I would often hear, "Why are you here?" So number one.
Mm.
But I think you have the history of the KKK out here in the South and slavery. And so it still has a very different feel for those of us in the US. What I've noticed is being on the East Coast is a very different feel than the West Coast. Reed, let me ask, and you can respond however you want. How did we do? How did your mom and I do with the issue of prejudice?
Mm, I think that
Yeah, how are you supposed to answer that? But you can answer
I
it
know it's
however you
so,
want.
so, and sometimes I take a little bit longer to think of a response. I'm not always kind of in the moment, but
I
which
know
is a bit
I
ironic
told
because
you
I
you
know
weren't going to have to answer a lot of these, and here I throw.
no, that's fine. I think it's a great question because that's more um it's a good question for real life, because you encounter for example, I think we even talked a bit about homelessness last time, because that's something, especially if you live in a
Mhm.
city, you
Mhm.
encounter that quite a bit, right? Um, so something as simple as what do you do when there's a panhandler, right? Which I think we talked about last time, but or I think a good example is or of course, I grew up in the church, right? And I think that there is also a lot of prejudice that can be found in some churches, and I think a lot of people in different religions as well. I think that's one version of prejudice. I think it's almost just the group mentality sometimes, no matter what, whether it's politics, it's against prejudice against the other party, or if it's religion, it's um, against maybe people who aren't part of their religion. So I think there are lots of different forms of prejudice, and um, yeah, I think it can be hard to get away from because that goes into talking about biases as well, right? Which is a lot of those are hard to recognize in ourselves because it also, it hits our ego if we have to say, oh yeah, I do have a bias from maybe against this certain type of person, um, whatever it may be. So, um, it's a bit of a hard one for me to answer. You Uh, I think you did a very good job. Like I don't believe I grew up with prejudice, but yeah, I think it's one of those questions where you have to almost take a look at yourself and take some time and think about different situations to really get a good answer to that.
Okay. How about let me add another one. How about chauvinism? Did you ever see me put women down? Was I misogynistic? Did you see any of that in our home?
Mm. Uh, Actually, I'm glad you referenced the meaning as well because I knew I'd heard it. Um,
Like men are better
yeah,
than women.
yeah,
Look down, talk down to them,
yeah. Because
treat
I
them as
hear
less than.
because because Laura is from Mexico, so I think they call it machismo there.
There we go.
There's
Right,
something similar,
right.
right? So
Toxic
I
masculinity, whatever. Yeah.
yeah, I almost know that term more than chauvinism,
Okay.
but no, no, that's not something that would have crossed my mind. And actually, I'm the opposite in that I tend to I tend to think about equality a fair bit. And actually, during the second, up here they call it secondary in Canada, but high school, secondary school,
Mhm.
um, I took a social justice class. And it's funny because it'll actually have, especially in like in conservative politics and that, I hear the term, oh, a social justice warrior. Sometimes it's used as a negative, but it was interesting to see because we talked about those sorts of topics with, equity versus equality, et cetera. So I think, at least from my upbringing, I'd say I'm fairly well rounded in that aspect, and uh, yeah. So,
Frugality. I got that from my dad. I didn't even know. Two things came to mind. One is um, I just always saw him carry the same briefcase. I think he had in college. So he had a briefcase for about 25 or 30 years. And it wasn't until somebody said, you know what, we need to get your dad a new briefcase. And so my mind went to where his did, although I think he had nostalgia. So that's it. So that meant something to him. But for me, it was he was not into style. Actually, nobody in our home, we never really went shopping. So I was not into style. And so it's more functional. And I'm thinking, why does he need a new briefcase? It works. So that was pretty funny. So I got that from him. And I really do appreciate that. And then I remember while I was working during college, I was a waiter, so a server, and somebody needed some shoes. And so I took money out of my tip and I gave him my shoes. No, I'm sorry. I gave him money for his shoes. And somebody came up to me and they said, John, you're very interesting. He said, have you looked at your shoes? And I said, no. He says, you've got holes in the bottom of your shoes, but you're helping somebody pay for their shoes. And it was kind of second nature to me. So I'd like to say I'm a wonderful guy for doing it, but I think I inherited that. So that's a very nice, I mean, it's still a choice, but I have to attribute that to my dad that he was just very frugal. He wasn't miserly. He was just very frugal and he really didn't place much emphasis on materialism. So I benefited from that. It's probably very difficult for people if they're raised with a parent that always has to have the newest and the best, um, or told the opposite, that they can never purchase anything. So we as parents, hopefully, we're providing a balance to our kids with that.
and I do have a comment on that as well. I think that's definitely something I inherited from my dad. You may have met him. He's a great guy.
Oh,
um, yeah, because I've definitely noticed that in myself. I think you notice it more perhaps when you have a family, when you start a family of your own, because you need to either buy new things for the baby. It's lots of different purchases, of course, and Um, I mean, a lot of times, of course, when you're starting out, when you have a new family, as you well know, you don't have a lot of excess cash to spend on things anyway. But yeah, I think I almost have the mindset so much to
I'm
where,
going to bring you up.
oh, there
I
we
just
go.
realized, wait,
Good,
we're small. We should.
perfect. No, that's great. Yeah, I think I've been in situations where I've had the mindset of not valuing money enough, actually. So the you do almost have to have that balance where it's sure money is just an object and it's not, you know, uh, you don't want to get too emotional about it. But I think you do also have to be mindful that you're a lot of times in the situation as the man, you're the provider for the family, and so you do have to uh, like for example about helping out, we were talking about helping out other people. Just keep in mind you want to help out but be diligent in terms of this is your family's money. And yeah, because I think I've almost gotten scammed because I think I had the mindset so much of, well, it's just money, right? That's, oh, worst case if they're not being if they're not being truthful, oh, it's just money. But in the end, it's so I
mhm,
think
mhm.
I've
So
definitely
possibly being
inherited that.
set up to be taken advantage of.
Sometimes, yeah, like if you're, I think, depending on your mindset, but yeah, I'm definitely, um, I think, fairly frugal as well. So think I think I definitely got that.
Okay. The last two bullet points were generosity. I think we referenced that, and then social skills. That may sound funny all of a sudden to put that in there, but I thought, I think I came by the ability to feel comfortable in social settings because of my dad. Uh, my dad was
Mhm.
always comfortable. So, uh, regardless of setting. And so, some people are very nervous, and that may be because of their upbringing, that may be because of temperament. But to be able to see my dad interact with uh, people really in any situation or setting, including um, those that are wealthy or those that were involved in politics. So, one of the things I remember he emphasized, so I benefited from, was table manners. He wasn't overbearing about it, but it was nice to be able to know which fork do I use, which when we're setting the table, what do you do with your napkin? Because then I think that equips kids to feel comfortable and confident that when and if they go out to eat, let's say once they finally grow up, they go out, whether on their first date or their second date, um, whether they're meeting the potential in-laws, whether you go out, and here's when it really starts to matter. Um, let's say you are invited out to an important meal, maybe a prospective job employee or an employer, and it could mean a salary increase. It could mean a good job, and sometimes something as simple as poor table manners can cause someone to miss out on some opportunities. So, again, not talking about being snobbish, but that's an important thing to teach kids. How about manners? Do we say please? Do we say thank you? Do you eat with your mouth open? Or do you know how to eat with, you know, chew with your mouth closed? Do you know how to use utensils? Where do you put them? Right in between bites, where do you put them? In the U.S. versus Europe, and Canada still has that European feel. We tend to eat differently a little bit in more social settings. So that's kind of interesting. But so I learned that. I got that from my dad. So I benefited from that. Any thoughts about that, Reed? And then we're going to go on to you and
Sure.
the video you made, the little excerpts.
Oh, that'd be good. I think that because it's so broad as well, that topic about social skills, because it impacts so much of our lives in so many different areas. I think I've noticed for myself that it's a little bit different, or quite a bit different, being in, for example, a situation at work when just conversation wise. So I'm just going to close the door here.
Yeah,
Just in
you're
the
in
car for people.
oh yeah, you're in the field of construction, so probably a lot of social skills are lacking, and if you have them, they might even make fun of you. I don't know. What are you gonna what are you gonna say?
Well, I mean, it depends. It definitely depends who you're working with. But more thinking of like if you go to a new construction site, and actually here's a good example. So it is because it's also work related. So I've been in the position recently where I've been more in a foreman type position, which is
Oh,
a lead hand, you could say, kind of someone with more responsibilities for people who aren't familiar with construction. And so in that position, of course, you have more interaction with the client or the customer or let's say the safety officers, et cetera, right? People in those more important roles. So even in those situations, I think it is good, or it's obviously advantageous to have those skills of the politeness, but also, knowing there's a lot of different things that go into it. You could talk about critical thinking as well with interactions and knowing when to mention something or even just confidence as well. So I think being able to I have the skill to be able to interact well and with almost anyone I meet for the first time. So that's, I think, a good skill. But something I've been working on is the confidence. And I think that one, those are almost two different skills I find. Because you can, talk to someone you meet for the first time and interact with them, no problem. And then, but if you have to be the one to make decisions, sometimes it can be a bit daunting. Um, so yeah, I think different skill sets. Yeah.
I think your confidence is building the longer you are, and track record has a big part in that. And that's where I think parents can little by little help build confidence. Um, okay, well, are you ready?
Yes,
We'll
sir.
find out how much you remember, and then we'll talk about each one. So that's kind of what I gained from my dad. And
Yeah.
I will behind the scenes here. We'll get ready for. Again, for the audience, they don't know what's coming next. I mean, I'm sorry, you don't know what's coming next, Reed. So here we
Sure.
go. Okay. Oh, and I gave them titles. Okay. So I took snippets from, and if anybody wants to go and look at it, I had you know what? I'll have it next time. You can go on to my YouTube page, and there's a picture of Reed. So I think you can't miss it. So I forget what the title is. That I think it's "Who is Jon K. Uhler?" His son gives his thoughts. So that's kind of what you want to look for if somebody wants to see the entire video. So you talked about a number of things. First, have to do with or having to do with the impact that I had on you, and then we'll look at some of the things that you referenced sort of in endearing ways, what you enjoyed about your upbringing. And so we will then transition when we're talking about that. What can dads do, especially dads on a tight budget? How can they make memories with their kids? So without any further ado, we will talk about, okay, play from current slide. Yeah, let's see what's next. Okay, there we go.
Some of the items that I had written down just about memories and
Reed, can you hear that?
I can, yeah.
Okay, we'll continue here. So you can tell, oh, there it is. Okay, so if anybody wants to watch the full, I knew I had it somewhere. Okay, so that's the thumbnail you look for on my page if you want to see. Reed spoke for 45 minutes to an hour. We're just doing excerpts, but you had your pad of paper and you were good enough to sit in your vehicle and you kind of gave your thoughts.
time that I spent with my
Yeah.
dad and how he was involved, very involved as a dad in my life. He was very family focused and very hard worker, family involved in the family.
Okay, that was brief. Okay. And so I added some pictures. I don't know if you can see those,
Yeah.
right? You may remember some of those. You're in all of them, actually. So family focused. Um, what comes to mind with anything? Now looking at some of those pictures, and not that you necessarily have to elaborate on what you just said, but if there's anything that came to mind from that.
Not straight away, but I definitely remember the Lego set. So I saw in one of your, I think, one of the bullet points, um, it mentioned, you may have shared it just with me, the Thomas the Train.
Oh,
So I
there we
think I
go.
see in
That's
one of the photos
Thomas,
there.
right?
Now, for people who might just be listening to this, because I know some people, I like to listen to podcasts in the car and that. So one of the pictures is we have I think that's the train tracks set up, yeah, from when we were a kid.
We're
Just in
looking at
the,
a collage of just 5 pictures. Very
Yeah.
good.
So I remember that, and I remember going on the bike rides because I see us there on the bikes, and
That was in Southern California. Some people might recognize Angel Stadium in Anaheim if anybody's into baseball. So there's a kind of a river um, ride. You can ride along kind of the storm drain in a way. So there's a bike path in Southern California. So that's free, by the way. Right? That's what a parent can do.
yeah.
We had,
And I remember we used to go for bike rides as well a fair bit. Just I was obviously quite young in California, but I do remember in Pennsylvania even just going on fairly often. And those were always fun.
yeah, I remember credit to your mother. It was a neat idea. So she took you guys down to, I think it was Walmart, quite frankly, but they had a photography studio in there and, or maybe JC Penney's or I forget where, but that was very cute. So she dressed you guys up kind of color coordinated. I don't know if you remember that.
I vaguely do. Like I remember,
That was one of the few times I
yeah.
was not there. That was while I was at work, but it was neat to
Oh.
have some portraits of you guys.
I remember, yeah, we had some of those photos hanging on the wall, I think, as well. So, but and
And
then
it looks
I
like
don't
Easter.
completely recognize.
Uh,
Yeah, I was looking. Oh, do you think of painting the eggs?
I
The
think,
other one,
you know
or
what? I think that's Easter dinner.
okay.
So we had the eggs that we already painted. And then, as a
Oh.
matter of fact, that may be what we're doing on the bottom right. I don't know.
That
Yeah.
would make sense. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what that photo
Oh, no,
was.
that's
With
one of
the,
those little figurine statues. I think you're painting a cat. So that was
oh,
very cute. You were very artistic. So,
oh,
okay, let's see if
For
we've got.
the items that I had written down, just about
Can we
memories.
focus? No, we're okay. Let me get out of. I don't know how to advance this thing. Let's.
And he did put in a lot.
Okay, so let me. So the next one is uh, the impact, positive impact of a dad being faithful, and I'll have a question for you after this.
And
oh.
he did put in a lot of effort as a dad, as a husband. He was very faithful.
Here we go. Short, sweet to the point. Reed, when you were making this and you used the term "I was very faithful," what did you have in mind?
That was I want to say at least a year ago when I made that, or several months ago. But I'm just trying to think what I meant by that with faithful specifically. So I think you as a dad, as we just talked about, being your family focused in the sense of your family was your priority. And as you can see in the video here, I'm just looking off to the side because that helps me think a little bit better. Um, and being faithful, yeah, because we as kids, we knew that you would, number one, that you would be coming home after work. Um, I think the only times that you didn't come home were when you had, usually it was a work trip planned. And so we obviously all knew that in advance, and those didn't happen very often either. And yeah, you'd come home and we knew you, would be paying attention to us to the best extent that you could. And so I think it's the overall kind of feeling, as I think you mentioned that earlier as well, of it's not always something specific, like, because being faithful, of course, is more a character quality as well, I think, and more show than tell, as you mentioned. I think you described it a different way, but basically more show than tell. And so I think it's the feeling, obviously based off your actions as well, that you give to your family and your kids about that you care about them and that they are your priority. I think that's the general idea. What comes to my mind.
Well, that's nice to
Oh.
know. Right. That again, it sounds all it's sort of funny having you fill me in more. Like, tell me more about me. But
Yeah.
I think it's good also for other dads, right? How can we? And my guess is you're applying that to yourself as well. Like, How can any of us up our game? What are some of those characteristics that will help um, a child feel secure, child feel that their world's going to be okay? So, okay, let me go back to it. We'll do the next one. If I can remember how to do it. So we've got faithful.
And he
Oh, it's still faithful. Hold on. Okay, positive attitude.
There we go.
worked extremely hard, and especially working in a prison system. He didn't come home, you know, I never, I don't think I ever saw.
For those that are wondering, I didn't, for this particular um, get together read between you and me, I had
Mhm.
actually in the video, if anybody wants to go and see it, I added these. So um, what you're going to see is me quoting you, but it's really from the excerpt from the video that I did.
Him drink alcohol. He'd never come home and shout at us or, you know, extend that hate or that, you know, that negative energy from, for lack of better terms, that from that prison system. Like, I'm sure that was extremely stressful, right? I can't even imagine working in, because he used to work with some of the worst. He would be come home, he'd, you know, I'd love to give him a hug, you know.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So the reason that one stood out is how important it is when we dads come through the door. You know, and you're working all sorts of hours, Reed. And so again,
Mm.
it's now obviously me talking about what you were saying to me or about me. And so if there's anything else you want to add, but it's always been a good challenge. You know, what am I like when I come through the door at the end of the day? I think yeah, all of us can probably benefit from sort of self-examination with that.
That's true. Yeah, one example that I can think of in my own experience is, again, in this situation it's specific to construction, but I think pretty much any normal employee job. I think you have your bosses, you have your managers, of course. So there's this one, again, we call him a foreman, but you could say your boss, you know. There's this one boss that we have, and he's really good at his job, but, you know, probably has 2 decades, I'm guessing, working in scaffolding in this situation. But he's really stressful to work with for a lot of people just because he pretty much his expectation is that he should only have to tell you one time and that he wants things to be done the fastest possible. That's the idea. So I've learned how to work with him, but there are days when like you're inevitably going to get yelled at. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, so with that in mind, I think there have been sometimes when I've come home after working with him where I'll be almost in that mood, the where I am to be able to work with him, which is okay, go, 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 let's get it done. You know, very like action focused, all this. So that's a good example where obviously that doesn't often work in the home. So, uh, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I need to take a step back and figure out a way to get in a different mindset before getting home because uh, that, yeah, as I said, that just doesn't combine well with when you get home and can't, not a good habit to be yelling at your family. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, an
Right.
example.
Right. It's hard, right? How do we make that transition? So I appreciated you referencing that. Yeah, the prison is a different environment. Um, by the way, a certain naysayer out there is very interesting. I have certain fans or trolls, and somebody once said, "Oh, that picture of the guys in cages that John Euler didn't work there." And I want to reemphasize, no, that particular picture was taken in a different prison, but I'm the one that came up with that concept because SCI Crescent was the first to have a program like that. So I just want to throw that out there. Okay, moving along here. Let's go to the next one. So that was positive attitude.
Worked extremely hard.
Okay. Ethics and morals. So this was nice to hear, Reed, that I had a positive impact, but a challenge to each of us. Wait, where to go? Where to go?
And he taught us a lot about scripture and the Bible and work ethic. I have really good work
You
ethic.
were so
I
cute.
like
I
to
have
think
to
I have
admit,
good
you
work
were a
ethic
cute
to this
kid.
day. Um, and I know that it's important to do the right thing. And I'd say my parents, and especially my dad, were the major influences with that. And as well as morals, just, being a good citizen and having good morals.
Okay, there we go. Any thoughts on that? Again, it's like I'm asking you to add to it, but number
Well,
one,
that's fine.
it's nice. It's nice to know that was the case.
That's good. Yeah, and of course, my comments aren't always going to be kind of adding on comments about you as a dad. So it's not always just asking, "Oh, tell me more."
Tell me.
But
Okay, enough
even
about
though, of
me.
course,
What do you think about me?
yeah, I think it's
Pandering.
yeah, it is kind of funny because, of course, it's almost inevitable that you're gonna think, well, he's doing a podcast with his dad, and his dad is interviewing him about being a dad.
That's right. Tell me
So
more.
yeah, um, but yeah, I think in general, I almost got a bit sidetracked there. So we were talking about
The
um,
morals and
work ethic
attitudes.
and morals, right?
No more.
Yeah. So that's a really good one because I think work ethic in any industry, I think of oftentimes, of course, as being an employee in that when I think of work ethic. I mean, it has to do with the house as well, I suppose, doing chores and taking the trash out, etc. But I think that's definitely been helpful having a good work ethic, and because I think employers in general appreciate that for those, for people who are employees now. I think if for someone who runs their own business, I'm sure it would be quite helpful as well because you need that kind of that drive, and you know that you're the one who needs you're your own boss. You're the one who needs to get things done. But yeah, in general, the having good ethics and morals, I think people do notice that, even the small things. So a good example at the recent scaffolding course that I took, you referenced that. We were cleaning up after finishing some sort of training, and one of the one of the other guys grabbed a, a broom and he started sweeping up. And then I went and grabbed the dustpan. And I actually made a comment to the guy with the broom. I said, it's almost a bit silly for me to have the dustpan because it's one of those brooms where you almost need two people to have the one person to hold the dustpan and one person to hold the broom. I told him it looks a bit silly for me to be holding the dustpan. You have two guys on this one job. But he commented, he said, you know what? It actually looks good though. It shows that people see that you are willing to do those little jobs. So it might seem pointless in the moment, but I think that's a good example because even though I almost thought, is this really necessary? Does it look bad? But no, it actually, you're putting that little effort in for those little things. So yeah, I think if you instill in your kids, and I hope to do the same for mine or my kid, that stay till the work is done and just overall have a good work ethic. I think that'll go a long way because no matter the job, you have to work. Hard work can go a long way. So, yeah.
Good. No, that's I was just thinking how important it is then for, first of all, dads to lead by example. Um, I'm guessing you guys never heard your mother have to ask me to take the trash out.
I don't remember it, so I don't think
Uh,
so.
right? Because that's always been important to me, making sure that we're a team player, that there's no job too low. for dad. Dad should be willing to pitch in, and the importance of dad leading by example with that. So it was nice to hear that you referenced that. And also the issue of honesty and how many people are willing to cut corners. So to be able to have that internal thing, how many people steal from work? Okay, we'll
And
continue.
one
Yeah.
more comment about the honesty, because that's something I struggle with myself is again, with a lot of things in life, there's that balance. Like you talk about the concept of white lies, right? So there's there's the more obvious situations like stealing from work, as you referenced. That's pretty black and white. You could say, hey, okay, don't steal from work. But then um, there's trying to figure out, like, when I reference something I struggle with is sometimes I might be too honest, for example, where I might feel, oh, I need to explain everything to this person, right? Whether it's Laura or in a situation at work, whatever it may be. Now, that sounds like a good problem to have, but sometimes it's not a good idea to explain everything, to give every single detail to, because it might just cause people to get more worried, etc. So, again, it's a broad topic, but I think um, I don't know. Do you have any comments on that? That's just
Well,
what came to my mind.
yeah, no, that's a very good point, right? We can sit there and feel like we owe somebody almost too much of an explanation. So there's a balance in there, especially at work or what, right? Every situation is different. Um, I was just thinking, in general, I guess maybe what we're talking about is the issue of being conscientious, which means with conscience. So, can I allow my conscience
Mhm.
to be my guide? And if somebody begins to override their conscience, turn the volume down on their conscience, and little by little, they'll start to become callous and eventually indifferent. And so I think for the purpose of being a decent person, especially then within a family, especially spouses or partners, how important it is to make sure that I am living a life of integrity. So in a way, the same thing. Right. So if I am living a life of integrity, I will probably naturally be conscious or conscientious. Hopefully, I'm conscientious, because if I'm not conscientious, then I'm probably being selfish, and therefore I'm not living a life of integrity because that takes into account other people as well. So integrity really means that I'm the real deal, both in the light, in the dark, in public, in private. So if I'm doing the right thing in private, then I'm probably governing myself, especially in this day and age with stuff online or how easy it is to cut corners. So kind
That's a
of
good
went,
point.
kind of went a little far field on that.
Well, but it's important because it honesty plays into a lot of aspects of our lives. And one specific example, and then if you want, we can move on. But one specific example is with my daughter. I'll have situations where maybe I think there was one time where she fell from the changing table, for example, because of course she's still, a toddler basically. So dealing with those specific situations, and we are talking about new dads, so generally, so it's I think applicable.
Right.
Um, so that was one example. She ended up falling from the changing table, and it
Oh
might have
gosh.
been I.
So many parents have gone
I
through that. That's, a parent's worst nightmare. You turn around just for a second and before you know it.
exactly.
Yeah.
and and I think it might have been that I was like for a moment I was looking at my phone or whatever the reason was. It's quite possible. So of course, I had that feeling, oh no, and then I think I didn't actually tell Laura, for example, because I was, oh, I didn't. I think it ended up happening to her, or maybe she fell from the bed or something later on, and then maybe I referenced like, oh, it happened to me as well. But even those situations, or another one was she, our daughter, actually. it's happened more than once where she'll, if you leave knives in, places that are accessible, that's
Yeah.
obviously very applicable to new parents. Um, yeah, you look away from one moment. So I think the first time that happened to me, I, I was so nervous. I didn't even want to tell Laura. So that's another example. I referenced just talking about honesty. Um, 'Cause I'm like, well, what good is it going to do bringing it up, right? Because it's just going to make me look like a bad parent, And obviously you feel bad, like, oh my goodness, my child grabbed a knife. So I think that's a good example for new parents.
Yeah. And that brings up a point that I would challenge new moms and moms that have a spouse, partner, the father of the kids. There's probably two challenges that young mothers, new mothers go through. One is um, allowing dads to participate. So it's very easy for a mom to um, give the feeling that the dad is not necessary or he's not doing it right. So that's a challenge. So mention that to young mothers, any that are listening, that include the dad, let him feel that he's part of that. And then in a situation like that, what happens if something happens? Can I, as a spouse, but sometimes, as you just referenced, a mom can react in such a way that it's going to cause the dad not even to come forward with it. And that's probably true for each of us. We need to really make sure that can I be approachable and am I able to ensure that someone feels okay about coming forward with something? Because it's a hard thing for someone to sit on something and not be able to find resolution with that. So that's where each of us
Hmm.
can work on being conscientious as well. Like, am I approachable? Can somebody bring something to my attention? And for those of us that if somebody is coming to us, the question is, can I already discern that they probably are already going through it, and therefore their confession needs to be received with grace? The very fact that they're confessing is probably, if their conscience is working, they've already gone through the most difficult part, which is now they're verbalizing it. If anybody's familiar with the New Testament, that would be like 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, why is it so hard to confess? Because we don't want to face it. But through confession, there's grace. So it's just getting over that hurdle of can I confess? Can I bring it to the light? But there's the challenge for any of us as dads, as siblings, as spouses, as parents. Can I ensure that once something is brought to my attention, can I make sure I'm not piling on? Right, the person's conscience has already gotten to them, and so it's already done its work. So they are now back to being conscientious. So, but the injured party, they need to see that, okay, does your apology match? Do you really understand the impact? And so that's where if we do confess, we need to make sure that there's goodness of fit with that. These are good, really good, good points. Okay, let me
That's good.
go on the next one. We'll tell the audience that you are sitting in Canada right now, so we'll go maybe for just a little bit longer because the light is it's already dark here on the East Coast in the U.S. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one here. So we talked about morals and ethics. Okay, let me see if I can do this again.
And
Nope, I think that's the same one. Okay. Now, this was noteworthy. You brought it up, and so we'll talk a little bit about it because this, of course, is going to maybe sit differently with each person. And so I will just go ahead and play it.
and we would go to church on most Sundays, almost every Sunday, and we would have sometimes we'd have the youth group or Bible studies. So also, you would definitely say man of God. God was very important to our family and for us and for him. There were a lot of probably Saturday mornings. I don't remember exactly, but a lot of mornings when my dad was home early in the morning, he would be out with his coffee and his Bible. I remember coming out there a lot of times or peeking out, and I knew I didn't have to check where my dad was if he's not in the house. He's out there on the patio reading his Bible. So he took that very seriously.
Okay, let me ask a couple of things because somebody listening to that might have been triggered by a couple of different um, terms or words, and then you can elaborate in whatever way. You said definitely a man of God. So, depending upon somebody's background, that might sound like, oh my gosh, what is that? So, how would you define that? Because that was actually nice to hear, but then if someone comes out of a really toxic religious background, they've heard this term. Um, and you and I actually have never discussed this until now. So, when you use that phrase, um, for people that are listening, what do you mean by that? Because it was nice to hear, but now
Yeah.
tell me what's involved in that as far as from your perspective.
Yeah, and that makes sense because I can see, especially because there are a lot of families where God is just used as a reason to do things or almost as an excuse, you could say. So I can see why it would have that, it could have that negative connotation. And for example, even a good example is you think of priests, especially Catholic priests, what connotation for, especially people outside
Oh,
of the church, what do people think of? So, yeah, I would say just the overall way of going about life and uh, with the focus on God and on the Bible, because that's the idea I got as a kid is that you used the Bible as your your guidebook. You could almost say your focus on just dealing with stress in life, and also using prayer as to help figure out what to do in different situations. So just as a general, uh, yeah, just don't know what else to add in there, but
okay.
that's the idea.
You mentioned that on Saturdays. So it was interesting for me to hear that because that's one of those things I wouldn't have thought that if someone were to ask me, what do you think your kids remember? That wouldn't have come to mind. So that's one of those things that you just saw and it came to mind. So when you said that you would know, like Saturday mornings, that I would be down there, was that a negative thing? Was that a strange thing? What feel did you get from knowing that your dad was down there with his Bible?
It wasn't negative because generally, because you'd still make time for us throughout the day, so it wasn't as though you were ignoring us. And I'm pretty sure there were times when I would go down and say hi and
I
just see
remember.
how it's going. So it wasn't like you were ignoring us, but I think it was more positive than sort of neutral in the sense that, I as a kid, I saw you sitting there like fairly consistently, being focused on something that you believed in and that you felt would have better the experience with the family as well. So they're just getting home there
Oh,
uh,
okay.
with the stroller.
That's cute.
um, yeah, so I think overall it was a more positive because I think because I knew as a kid I knew the impact of it, and I knew that you it showed the kind of focus and commitment.
Okay. It was nice for me to know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. We just got a couple more of these, and then we'll get into, well, hopefully this has been helpful for parents.
And
Thing. Okay. Oh, practical skills. This is a good one. Not that the others weren't. Um,
And Dad, uh,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to move the sunshade as well, just to see.
Oh,
I put it. Now the sun's gone down, so I'll see if that gives us a bit more light.
yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Yeah.
Just a moment.
Do you want me to play it now? Can you still hear it?
Uh, yeah, yeah. Play it, and while it plays, I'll just move that.
Oh, there you go.
And we would go to church on most Sundays, almost every Sunday, and we would
Oh, I'm
have
sorry. Wait, I'm playing it again. Okay. You haven't missed anything, Reed. I'm just duplicating it here. Okay. Bless his heart. We'll wait for you to come back. I'll just exit. There you go. That's fine. Okay. I don't want you to miss you. Okay. Somehow.
Well,
Okay. There we go. It's a
I might
practical.
forget what I said.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. What's
my
going
dad taught me how to sharpen a lawnmower blade. That I can't say I'd be good at it now necessarily, but because that was so long ago, right? But I remember flipping the lawnmower over. He'd show me how to like, take the blade off and then take the sharpener and do that. So he was very involved in that sense. And yeah, we would spend a lot of time cutting the grass. We had one of the push mowers, and we had probably an acre of grass to cut. So that would take a few hours, on the weekends and that. Again, taught you good work ethic. And we would kind of make fun of my dad because I remember that I think my sister or someone would mention how long it took him to cut the grass the first time that we got the push mower. And then we would compare ourselves to that. It's like, hey, I got it done this long. Like, Dad, look how long it took you. What's up with that? So that was funny.
I had to add that part because that was actually very funny. I remember. So, any thoughts that you want to add to that, or either towards me or just for dads? Because I didn't have my dad really didn't show me much in life, quite frankly. So, it's nice to know that you remembered some practical skills I was able to show you.
Hmm. Yeah, I still remember that. The what I talked about with the comparing the time it took for the lawnmower. And I think there were just talking about my personal experience, there you taught the practical skills that you knew, I would say. Because
Yeah, that's a good way to put
yeah.
it, right? That's which probably
Oh,
weren't too many, but as many as I had. I guess I developed a few, but
yeah. So I think that's a good example where, for example, for car skills, I'm definitely lacking myself. I'm starting to get better, like learning the basics. But I think that's just simply something that you probably didn't know or that you weren't
never
as
saw it.
familiar with.
Just
Yeah.
never saw it.
So that's obviously going to be very different for each kid because
That's right.
I know there are a lot of kids or a lot of dads who are quite into cars and that. So I'm sure that's a good skill to teach your very good skill to teach your kids if you have it.
A very
Um,
practical one. That's right. That's right.
yeah. So, but yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Just if you have a skill, especially a practical skill that and just it's good to be able to teach that to your kids because and it's going to vary so much depending on on the family and the person. So I think yeah, you did a good job teaching the ones that you knew.
Yeah. I did do parallel parking with you.
Yes, I've gotten very good at that. I still
You
remember it.
you mastered that one, so that's one of the things that we did one day. Is we were
Yeah.
turning the car over to you.
And that was actually very neat because I'd forgotten about that until you referenced it. But that was
You
a
were
very
good.
neat
And talk
experience.
about a practical skill to be able to have.
Yeah. Oh, very useful too, especially in the city. And actually, talking about cars, just as we're talking about, especially new dads and fathers in general, I was thinking when you, as in my experience with the car that you, um, you and Susan actually were kind enough to give to me, I think like I really appreciated it, the kind of the gift of the car, but I think I was a bit almost too young at the time, or too. Let me just close this other door to focus a bit
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Just got people talking outside. Yeah, I think I didn't quite know all the finances that would be involved and the kind of maybe all how exactly to take care of it well enough. So, and that's obviously it's not necessarily a fault on your own, or it's your fault, but I think it's something to keep in mind just based off experience. Because now thinking back on it, because I think it ended up having some mechanical issues just because it was a little bit
Yeah,
older.
unfortunately,
It,
it was a little
even
older.
though it was well taken care of for the year it was. But I obviously feel bad now. I'm like, oh, I had to sell it. It was a really nice, really nice car. So I wish I still would have had it. But I think I didn't have the mindset at the time just how to adequately take care of it and to make the decision: is it worth doing these, fixing this $2,000 issue or however much it was, right? Because when I think financially speaking, that's something I just finances in general. I have had to. I think everyone does, right? With your own experiences with credit and making purchases in new cars and financing cars, etc. But I think it can be difficult, especially when you're younger, because I think I was around 20 at that time.
Mhm.
I think it can be hard to make those decisions. Is it worth fixing this car, or is it
That's
worth?
right, especially with an
Uh,
older car. That's right. That's right.
yes. So I think that's good. Maybe a good idea to have an overall discussion instead of, because it's great to, in that example, to give your kid a car, and I think that was obviously very kind, and it was great to have while it did last. But maybe it's a good idea as well. Okay, what's the full picture going to be? The maintenance costs. What are
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
you know what's everything that's involved in it?
Yeah, and that's a good point, right? If any of us give our kids a car, the challenge is if we can't afford a new one, so we're giving them a used one. Ideally, and in our case, the irony is we had it fully checked out, and I told the mechanic, listen, this is going to Canada. So, of all things, please make sure the heater works. And I said, yes. Well, he obviously didn't. Right. And so we paid for your flight down. We were so excited. We're going to give you this car. You're driving it up. And what should happen? The heater core goes. And I'm thinking, wait a second. We just told the mechanic, give it a once over. It's going to Canada. Please fix everything. So we're handing him a good car. So, ironically, even just on the way up, you ran into heater cores, a significant thing. We were able to pay for your place to stay and then trying to get the thing fixed. And
Mhm.
but then you still had a vehicle that was older. And as you're saying, what do you do if, especially if you're on a limited budget and you start being nickel and dimed? Because one never knows when all of a sudden a car is going to start to have a lot of problems if it's an older car. I know your sister kind of ran into that. One of the things we tried to do, I don't know, well, you wouldn't necessarily have remembered the binders, so I recommend that parents, I never saw this growing up. And so I started having to learn how many things should be in the maintenance rotation schedule for your vehicle because we were tired of breaking down all the time, not breaking down the road, but just having all these issues come up. So I ended up having a very detailed spreadsheet, and I gave it to your sister with the vehicle, with the Kia. Everything from the big stuff, timing belt, to normal oil changes, to then all the different hoses and all. So I recommend dads, idea, maybe moms as well. But so if you're a single mom, I recommend you do this. But be able to have a binder, as it were, of, first of all the ongoing work that you have so that you can anticipate both the scheduled maintenance and work with your mechanic and ask him to give you a printout of so that you can budget for it. What should be coming up so we don't end up breaking down on the side of the road? Fortunately, we really didn't break down on the side of the road. But boy, you take to them your mechanic, and before you know it, he's telling you, and especially if he's trustworthy, he's telling you you need these other things fixed, and it can drive you nuts, especially if you're on a fixed budget. So I guess that's a word to parents for kids. Get them involved in that. Help them. if you're not a mechanic, I'm not a mechanic, but at least then the kids begin to have a sense of what's a regular maintenance schedule. If you go, we used to go to Firestone, and so they would print out, and we got to know the folks very well. And so he would try to give us a sense of, okay, in this many thousands of miles, you're going to have to do this, and then this. And so I began to catalog that so that the worst thing in the world is that car problems, car surprises. But then, as you just said, Reed, what do you do when you're starting to be nickel and dimed by all these mechanical issues? That's a very hard decision um, to make. Like, do I go ahead and get a new car or a car that is more reliable, but now I have a car payment? So
Mhm.
it's a challenge. Good point. Good point.
Yeah, and I I think as a new parent that those are good discussions to have starting early, similar to a lot of different topics, but we're kind of easing into it, and
Well, my granddaughter,
making
your daughter is only two.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
you know,
A little bit early, but
that's right. Good for you.
yeah,
But I think this is where dads come in. Dads, some of the practical stuff, even guys that don't know anything like me. Can you help your kids? Do they know how to fill a car up? So let's even start with the basics. So have them get out of the car because it's easy for us if we've got kids and as they grow, why do I want to stop and have them get out with me? But it's important. We always need to be thinking in terms of life skills. So when your kid reaches a certain age, does he know how to put the credit card in or the debit card in and pump the gas? Do they know how to check the oil? Do they know how to fill the tire up? So tire up. What is air pressure? Where do they find that on the tire or the inside panel of the driver's side door? Washer fluid. Those of you in colder temperatures or where there's sludge, it gets on, right? You go through, I remember in Pennsylvania, we were going through washer fluid all the time. And word of the wise, if you go to a colder area, you may need a car starter to warm that up. I'd never heard of one. We were in Southern California. So think in terms of that. That's nice so that by the time you go out in the car, it's already running. If you live in a snowy area, you're going to have to think about undercoating. Nobody told us that. And we ended up with rust within about 6 months on a vehicle we'd had for 10 years. So where there's ice that's put on the roads, we're sounding like this is a mechanic show. But so those are the things that the dads and parents can help share with kids, and then teaching them driving. How do you help them understand all the different conditions of the road? And we did. I taught you driving. We went out and how did I
yeah.
do? How did I do? Oh, there I'm
Oh,
pandering for
oh,
a response, but
of course, yeah. What am I supposed to say? I mean, I'd say I've gotten to be a reasonably good driver now, so I'd say I'm sure. Like, I don't remember. I remember a little because I don't think we had a chance to do a lot of drives.
okay,
So I think our
look,
car. I remember I remember some, especially with
because it
the
was because
Pontiac.
you left early up to Canada, so I don't think I had a chance to help you
Uh,
practice as much. But when you came down, then we still at least went on the
mm,
freeway and other things to get you used to
exactly.
Susan's car.
Yeah, and parallel parking, as you mentioned.
Parallel
So,
parking. Come on.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Uh,
yeah, I think um, I was going to mention something else. Oh, I think it is good to talk about. Obviously, as you mentioned, it feels like a mechanic show now, but I think especially with cars, it's something that has such an impact on our lives nowadays, especially since a lot of people have them, and if not one, maybe multiple. And you got to think about those things eventually with, okay, am I going to teach my kids to drive, etc. When did they get their license? And actually, Laura has told me, and that's my fiance for those who may not be familiar, she's told me that she wishes that her dad would have let her drive. I don't know if he didn't let her drive at all, but I think it also had to do with because she was a girl. So he taught their son, but she didn't get taught. So now she's trying. We've been trying to get her license or just get her knowledge test, but she's afraid of driving. So
Mhm.
that's why and she's in her 30s now. So that gives you a perspective. Like it really impacts you as an adult, even something as simple as that. Like, oh, did your parents teach you to be familiar with driving? And keep in mind, she's actually driven motorcycles before, right? So it's just
Ah,
specific to car
different.
or to cars as well. So I think it's a good topic to talk about. Just even what you mentioned, the undercarriage. We live in Vancouver here, so up in Canada. It's on right on the west coast for those who aren't familiar, and it is a relatively warmer climate. Like you get maybe 2 weeks of snow each year, but then you move one province over, just east, and you get to Alberta, and you do have to have, as you mentioned, the car starter, and I'm sure they get the undercarriage as well. But I hadn't actually heard of that either.
Yeah. Um, and thinking in terms of driving now, I recall that you ended up moving up to Canada. You wanted to spend your senior year in high school up there. And so I didn't get a chance now that I think about it. But Nicole and Lane, so I went out to, and I recommend this for any parent. If there's a local community college which shuts down on the weekend, it's a lot of parking area. And so it's a beautiful place to go and practice. And I recommend that dads purchase traffic cones because that's if a kid, the scariest thing is to learn how to pull in, not just parallel park. We did that with you, Reed, the cones, but it's a whole lot more forgiving than hitting a bumper. So put the cones where the other cars would be, and like swinging into a parking space, especially if it's a place with a little more narrow parking spaces, and then also backing in, backing in and backing out. So traffic cones are wonderful. And if you get the really tall ones, then the kids can see when they're in the vehicle, they can see. And so I recommend that. It really was a good experience. And then the question is, can you, as a parent, your mother actually handed that over to me, and you can't, she just had a huge aversion to dying, I guess. So I'm the one that rode with them, and it's a different experience. I think the floorboard on the passenger side, we want to start to apply the brakes, and so we're helpless, and so it's pretty funny. I found myself time and time again pushing in on the floorboard because your kid has your life in your hands as they're pulling out into traffic. So but that's a really important one. Parents will tend to remember that as either a good experience or a really negative experience because a lot of I mean, you're out of control, literally, as a parent. So can you maintain your fear factor while tending to be calm, even though you wonder if you're going to make it back alive?
Sure.
Okay, we got a couple more of these, and then probably at this point, sooner rather than later, we'll just stop and we'll pick it up when it works on our schedules. Okay,
Okay.
so what do we got here? So we did the practical skills. Oh, okay. So now we're going to make a little mental shift in our minds. So Rita, we just talked about kind of what you and I remember. I went through that bullet point of what I remembered, and you were good enough in that video to talk about the things you remembered. So now, as you and I have talked about, part of the goal of this is to help new dads think in terms of how can they up their game? How can they be more meaningfully involved? And especially if we're on a budget. And so what we're going to look at is a, a couple little video clips, two of which actually come from this podcast that I put together. You can see us riding bikes. So I referenced different things, but I took just one or two little snippets. But then we're going to have some screenshots and a couple little videos that we can comment on. So there was a fun little moment coming from your video where you referenced movies. And I really want to encourage dads to think in terms of getting into it with your kids, getting involved in the movies that they enjoy because it's a lot of fun. And what people are going to see from this video, so on the left, you can go onto somebody can go onto my YouTube channel if you want to see the interspersing of my comments. So this is one of the few excerpts from that particular video, but I sort of introduce what then you're going to talk about. No, let's see if it's over here. So, do your kids know that they matter by do you place their interests and their interests, certainly needs, but interests above your own? How about the things they enjoy? Life is busy, and we only have so much time in the day. So let's say Friday night comes along. You've had a hard day. Well, you might enjoy a certain genre of movies. Let's say you're into historical movies, or you like war movies. Talking to dads here, or whatever it is, sports or whatever it is. Now, your kids may be into sports, but if your kids have certain movies that they really love to watch, my kids used to love some of the animated films such as Over the Hedge, Tangled, Despicable Me. That was a really fun one, by the way. Okay, just there were so many that we watched. Okay, so you have your choice. You only have a limited amount of time. It's Friday night, and the kids want to watch a movie with you. What do you do? Do you let them pick out the movie? Or do you say, no, 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 it's dad's turn? Or it's my time. And so you put on what you want to watch. I once heard of a dad who had the king's chair. As a matter of fact, Dad, do you have a certain chair that all the kids know? No, 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 that's Dad's chair. Well, then I want to politely suggest you get over that. You dethrone yourself and you let the kids sit wherever they want. Do you ever wrestle for control of the remote control? You need to stop that. Okay, the kids need to be able to see a dad who is selfless. So, dads, what I recommend is this. You enjoy what your kids want to watch because kids love making sure that dad is into it, right? They love curling up next to you.
And I remember there were a lot of times, we would be watching movies. I'd be sitting beside my dad, and I remember he was very involved when we were watching the movies, and he'd be laughing with us. And yeah, that was a good time, a good memory. I remember we used to love, or at least us kids, hopefully my dad did too. We used to love the movie Tangled, I think it's Disney or Pixar, and he had the horse, or I think Eugene. I remember a lot of funny scenes from that, so that got us laughing. And Despicable Me, we quoted until this day. You've got the gadgets and the gizmos.
I have accepted a new job.
Whoa, really?
Yes, I have been recruited by a top secret agency to go undercover and save the world.
You're gonna be a spy?
That's right, baby. Crew's back in the game with gadgets and the weapons and cool cars, the whole deal.
Awesome! Are you really gonna save the world?
Yes, I am.
Look out! Papadam?
As a matter of fact, one of the times we were watching a movie and my kids turned to me and they said, Dad, you're so funny. And I said, what? You always slap your knee when you're laughing really hard. Well, that's a neat thing, right? That was a nice little thing between myself and my kids that only they would know.
So, like, even to this day, I will still throw out a quote every now and then, and Gru and everything.
This is from Reed, and we used to imitate Gru, if anybody's familiar, with the series Despicable. I don't know. This is, you may not have seen that I actually did this, Reed, but I couldn't help myself. This was just such a fun little voice. Do you know what's coming up?
I have an idea. I'm sure it's going to be the gadgets and the gizmos.
Okay, here we go. Pull me. But every now and then we would have... I want to encourage parents to keep voicemails. Why? Because it's fun to be able to... Well, any of us, if you have anybody you care about, you know what? Every now and then, keep a voicemail, because even when somebody dies, it's nice to be able to... Judith Riesman and I were good friends, you can see there. But it's nice to be able to go back and actually listen to their voice. So I encourage parents, you know what, save some of the voicemails, and just like parents also should be taking videos. But I want to encourage people, you know what, save some voicemails that are endearing to you. So, Reed, you did one for me that was just hilarious. So I will now play it here. Different dialects or accents, and we used to talk in the Russian accent. And so Reed was calling me from work, and it was cute. He was pretending to be a coworker from Canada, and it's kind of cute. So what you're going to hear is Reed, my son, projecting in a Russian accent. He's going to talk in the... No, sorry. That's Judith Friesman. Okay, here's Reed. So this is actually my son imitating a Russian accent.
Hello, Mr. Euler. This is Greg. I have heard you are a great man, and I just wanted to say hello. And your son Reed says hello as well. He is also a great guy. He has a great father. Okay, have a great night, and Reed says that he loves you, just so you know.
Next, we are going to steal.
Pause for effect.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, now the audience just watched some of our favorite clips. We would have those. I'll stop sharing just for. We would just suddenly break into those different lines. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I still remember that.
And so
That's
that
what
was.
I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. So that's why I kept that voicemail, because it was very endearing to me. So you are Greg. Um, so what was that like to watch that? And then any thoughts between us or with dads encouraging him to watch the videos to get into it with the kids?
I'm actually glad that you didn't show me that before, because I barely remember that. I vaguely remember that recording, but it's neat to see. And obviously, just the fact that you saved it shows, it was you were glad to have had that. So that's a lot of fun. And yeah, especially Despicable Me. I know we have a lot of lines from that one. I think it's the animated movie, or the movie in general, that we have the most kind of quotable lines from. So I think that's a great example. It's just, yeah, even as an adult, you still remember those.
So do you guys, I'm sensing then that you guys could sense that I enjoyed our times. Because there's a big difference between somebody that's sitting like a lump on a log saying, okay, I'll watch, versus somebody that is getting into it, or it can enjoy it and then even slap his knee when he finds something funny.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's probably half of the fun for the kids watching with their parents. And of course, talking from my perspective as well, I think it's, you can, I mean, in any relationship, I think you want to see, even, your partner, if you're showing them something you like, you want to see that they are at least paying attention, and, into it at least a little bit. Not that they have to love it, but just, that they're at least paying attention. And so I think that makes a huge difference, because I don't think it would be nearly as enjoyable for us as kids if you were just, on your phone, or, or, going out of the room constantly. And just, yeah, keep it going. Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, there you go. So that's can be free, right, for dads to do. So if you're on a budget, dad, you can get into it with your kids. They're meaning in a good way with the videos. Okay, we'll go with a couple more, and then we'll do your up right there. Oh, okay, bike rides, right? That doesn't cost anything other than initially purchasing the bike and then a bike rack. depending upon where you live, right? It's either going to take more or less effort. But once you acquire the bikes, it's free, and it's just such a neat time. If I,
And bicycle rides, we a lot of Sundays, I think it was, we would go for bike rides with friends from the church and people we knew.
Tips for dads on Father's Day. Dads.
Hey, that's a surprise. I didn't tell you I'd do this, so here we go. I just thought I would throw this in there because these were actually things I posted last year, so I figured I would find the applicable ones and intersperse them.
Instead of buying additional video games for your kids, how about getting them bikes and finding places to ride? Numerous states have rails to trails, where railroads were converted into miles of wide, easy-grade bike paths. It make for truly amazing times.
Yeah, we'd throw the bikes on the back on the car rack, and yeah, we'd go for probably an hour or 2 hours.
That actually is a picture from when we went to Hilton Head, but there's the bike rack on the back. So depending upon how many bikes you have, you may have to get a bigger bike rack. So
Long bike rides, especially in the fall. That was gorgeous because around in those eastern states and in Pennsylvania, it has gorgeous falls. So you have all the leaves riding.
Reed, any thoughts about that?
Well, it's definitely good. It's something you can do on multiple occasions, bike riding. I think that's a very good example because it's something that's just enjoyable on its own, as you said, without just the initial investment of the bikes. And of course, you can get, I think a lot of people are going to get used bikes off Marketplace, for example. I know would probably be the first place I'd go instead of buying 800.
And that's good advice. So Marketplace, that's on the internet.
Yeah, just be careful of scams. And
oh yeah,
yeah. So I think that's the perfect example. And I'm trying to think of some other examples or some other things that we did. I know we had the badminton set as well.
Actually, that's going to come up.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll leave that for there. But yeah, that's just my first thought. Is it's something that has a lot of repeated uses, and especially if you go with friends, that was a lot of the fun as well. We'd go with some other families that we knew, so oftentimes we as the kids, we'd ride ahead a little bit, so we'd have the group of kids riding together, and I'm sure you adults, we're probably riding in the back and talking. So how the kids and adults.
Yeah. And it sure is good exercise for kids. So, okay, we'll do. Should we do one or two more?
Yeah, I think we could do two more.
Okay. Let me see if I may be getting the hang of this a little bit.
And I had a dirt bike.
Oh yeah.
My dad got me this dirt bike. Oh, I think
I've entitled it a mini bike. I guess a mini bike is smaller. This one just had 3 gears, but it was a small. You're right. It was a dirt bike, so I had 3 gears.
At least for a kid, you think of it just as a dirt bike,
yeah,
because it's your size.
It was an actual little motorcycle, but a dirt bike. You ended up being really good at it.
It was for all 3 of us, but I was probably the one who used it the most because I started working, doing the summer job, and I would take the dirt bike to the summer job as well. And my dad actually put in the time in our backyard, because again, our backyard was pretty big. A lot of it was probably 1 or 2 acres, not sure exactly, but he made this whole bike path for the dirt bike, including 1 or 2 jumps, and that in all the shrubbery and all the woods, and it must have been a serious pain putting that together, but that was a lot of fun. So I used that quite a bit, just in the backyard there, because how easy is that? Just go right in the backyard, you have this whole path, and so I got pretty good at doing like the little jumps and going around the corners and everything. So that was a ton of fun, as a kid.
Now, I'm aware with that not everybody, I mean, in Southern California, we certainly couldn't have done that. So we were fortunate enough to have a piece of property out there, even as a rental, to be able to, Ms. McCon was good enough to allow us to to do that. And so I chopped trees down and hacking and whacking things. But that was such a fun experience to watch you guys ride. And I'll admit, every now and then I got on the little bike, but it was just super enjoyable.
Oh yeah. And I thought as I was listening to my self-talk there, I was referencing super easy to get on the bike and go, not to make the bike path.
Yeah.
As I said, you can think how easy that was not to make it, but
No,
yeah.
but how much fun, right? That you guys were able to hop on and you just started zooming around.
Oh yeah. And some other things, just while we're talking about activities as a kid, you might reference some like the badminton. You might reference those later as well. But I remember we had the BB gun as well, which again you might reference later. So that was a lot of fun because I don't imagine those are
Actually, I
super
don't
expensive.
reference that, so that's great. Why don't you describe it? I mean,
Okay.
you guys ended up getting really good at shooting because we purchased a Daisy rifle or whatever, a BB gun.
Yeah. And as I'm talking, I'm thinking of, you know, how, especially nowadays, people, oh, it's a different era, right? From when I imagine even from when you grew up as a kid, people all are much more, for better and worse, much more careful with their kids, but they're also much more careful with their kids. So I think
Classic
it's,
thing. Careful, don't shoot your eye out.
yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking as I'm describing, like, oh, we had a BB gun, and I'm going to reference we had the bows and arrows. People are going to think, oh,
We
yeah,
actually
he
talk
didn't.
about that. Yeah, you set up
Yeah,
bales of hay. Now, again, for those that have the property to do this, it's a really neat thing, but you got to make sure that you don't shoot your eye out or that classic
exactly.
phrase. But
That's what I was thinking as I'm describing all these weapons, and like it goes
or don't
without
shoot
saying,
your
of course.
brother's eye out.
Yeah, it's like, of course, yeah, you have to make sure it's safe first, and yeah, but with that in mind, those are some examples because I don't think either of those were super expensive. I imagine, right? Like the BB gun, I'm not sure, but
I got it
um,
from Walmart, so you can purchase it relatively inexpensively. Then we put targets up for you guys. We had a tree, the willow tree. So we're able to, with adult supervision, I'm not suggesting, right? It's got to be age appropriate, but it's really neat to be able to teach gun safety and then to allow the kids to compete and their friends. You guys brought your friends over, and so that was neat.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. And actually, I remember the targets, but what I remember more is I really just remember that because you referenced it, the targets. But we had the cans, just
Hmm.
once you're done with an aluminum can, you just put it on a log, almost like the movies. You see the cowboys shooting the glass bottles, probably better to do aluminum cans so you don't have glass in the yard. But
That's right.
yeah,
And I even think we had some hanging cans. Yeah, just empty aluminum cans or tin cans and just hanging from a branch.
yeah,
So you got to make sure there's no neighbors behind you. So fortunately, we had a big enough yard where nothing was going to be damaged. But it's
yeah.
there again. It's just the purchase initially, but then it's really hours of fun. It's very
Mhm.
inexpensive. As long as the kids are safe, right? Then it's really fun and they enjoy. We would all do target practice, and you guys became really good shots. And so it gave me a run for my money, and I probably lost a number of times. Became really good at it.
Yeah. And one other thing I remember is the cap guns, which I might have referenced in my video as well.
Hmm.
So I think as a parent, it's good to remind ourselves that we can let kids use their creativity, and so it doesn't always have to be for in the example of video games.
Yeah.
Obviously, the video games, they can be fun, and I know I had a lot of fun using video games as well. But it pretty much provides all the entertainment, right? Like doesn't have to be a lot of imagination. But in the sense of cap guns, for example, which we had this, like wooden kind of pretend toy revolver, basically, or it was some sort of, like, almost like an 1800s
Hmm.
little revolver or some sort of pistol, and it could actually fire the cap gun. So you'd put cap. I don't know how to describe it for someone who's not familiar with it. It's just it makes a loud bang, basically. So it's fun for kids to play with. And so my brother and we would play war in the backyards. Of course, oftentimes it might be more the boys who enjoy that, but to each their own.
This is good, kind of going back through memory lane. You know what? Let me do this one because I think what we'll do is, what else do we have here? These are a little too small almost. Okay, let me go through the center. Okay, you know what? Let's do this one and then maybe we'll end on one more. Now, not everybody can do this. As a matter of fact, can I increase this? Maybe I can once I click on it. Maybe not. Is it big enough? You know what? Let me do this. I'll get out of this just for a second and I'll go to, you can tell I'm tech challenged here. I'll go back to this one. Okay, so let me go to the right one here. Backyard sports. Hold on here. Fire pit. Which do you want to do? Fire pit or the cinder block fort?
I'm thinking, I know a lot of people might have regulations for the fire pit.
Okay, we'll do the cinder block fort.
Yeah.
Although, this may be harder to construct with the, as we'll show with the fire pit. It actually is fairly user-friendly. But let's do this one because if somebody has a space, and I would never have thought of doing this, but here we moved into a place where there had been a garage that had been torn down. Our patio was actually the cement floor. So it was the bottom of this garage, and so it was a beautiful patio. But all the cinder blocks had been piled kind of down below. And so when we moved in, I see this pile of cinder blocks, and I thought, I wonder if. And so little by little, I started to turn them all over because it was just this massive pile. And so I thought, for those that do have some money here, we're talking about a budget, but if you want something that will provide hours and years worth of fun, that ain't going to go anywhere, it's not going to swallow your kids up with it. You don't have to worry about bolts and nuts coming loose or screws coming right. You might want to think about this because it turned out, well, I'll let you literally talk about it here and then you can add to it, but it was worth the time investment. So I had to clear all these cinder blocks off. My back was sore for days, but then I started to, and they're heavy enough, and it wasn't high enough to where it didn't become the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But boy, you guys sure used it a lot.
So something I wrote down is he built this cement block fort in our backyard, and it was
okay. So there we are. That's you can see the floor of what was the garage. And so they took all the cinder blocks from this garage.
So something I wrote down is he built this cement block fort in our backyard. And it was...
Well, I won't touch the... Okay, I won't touch the cursor. Oh, and when you said the patio furniture, so we had a swing set. Fire is just kind of on the other side of those little white chairs. So that's where our fire pit was. But it made for a beautiful patio. But again, all the cinder blocks were over there where the yellow is, and so I just rearranged them and made this tower with stairs and whatnot. So again, I didn't have to use any cement; it was just the weight of the cinder blocks.
The coolest thing to have as a kid, because I remember, you have the cement blocks or the cinder blocks, and they have those little holes in them. So I would keep, if I would find some rocks or animal bones in the backyard, because we had a very good backyard. Like, that was one of the neatest things about growing up where we grew up.
You were a cute kid.
And yeah, because we had tons of trees. I loved tree climbing. My mom would actually tell me not to climb higher than 3 times my own height. There were a lot of times I didn't listen. Most of the time she wasn't there, she wasn't looking. So yeah, I would just climb so many trees. And now I work in scaffolding, so that's kind of ironic or appropriate because still working at heights. But that was just funny thinking about that. So yeah, he built this cement fort, as I was mentioning, all out of these cement blocks.
There's
Like
some
this
stairs.
pretty good size cement fort, and it had the stairs and everything. And that was the coolest thing when you're a kid, when you're a boy, especially. Because a lot of boys, they love playing, sword fighting and war and everything. So you have a whole fort at your disposal. So that was probably one of the neatest things to have. And he made that all by hand out of cement blocks that were just in a pile. So that's something that came to mind.
Okay. You guys use that all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's definitely as you kind of as a kid you make it your own, After yeah. It's definitely one of the best parts of the backyard. Because you can do so much on it. It's again with the creativity as kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if dads do have, I don't know how many cinder blocks. I have to admit there were a couple of hundred, probably a couple thousand. Um, so I don't know how much cinder blocks cost, but to think that once they're in place, and again, I think, yeah, you kind of build up, and so it's not like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, so it was safe. Um, so it ended up becoming a platform, really, and so the little walls. So it's just all your life, when all of growing up, you guys would use that. So if a parent, if a dad has the property, that would be worth. And if you don't know how to build, I don't know how to build. So that was a neat thing to be able, and it was sort of the envy of all your friends. I remember that all your friends would love that because it was so unusual.
Hmm. Yeah, because I can't think of any other families that I remember having a cement fort
Well,
right there.
cinder
So.
blocks outside. Okay. Well, Reed, you've been great. I'm aware of the time. There's a lot more to cover. So if you're okay with this, what we'll do is, as it works in our schedule, we'll just kind of keep plugging along and hopefully we'll be able to give dads and parents, but specifically dads, some ideas what to do. Dads on a budget, dads that don't have a lot of time to learn new stuff. So we've talked about BB guns, we've talked about bow and arrows, getting some hay bales, little motorcycle track if you have that, or get your kids involved in that. If it's somewhere, if you're in the city, it's a little more of a disadvantage, of course. So it depends upon where you live, but being able to think a little outside the box that can go a long ways. So, well,
Yeah.
any last thoughts, Reed? You want to share on behalf of
Mm,
dads, or
not at the moment. I think, yeah, we can, if we do other parts to this, I think we'll have to spread it out a little bit, as I
there you
mentioned
go.
to you. So
That's right.
even once a month, maybe.
That's right. People
Um,
have to hang
let's
tight.
see.
Make sure you subscribe so you know when Reed and I have done the next one, because there'll be a
Yeah.
lot of different things coming up. You'll be able to see Reed then in videos when he was a little tiny guy, all the way up till when he was older.
Mm,
So that's kind of fun. You'll see videos, home videos, snippets.
that'll be good. And oh, one thing I thought of, we were referencing one of the other topics. I might have to think of it later, but it just had to do with the way that you introduce your topics to your kids. It was something along those lines. Um, but I can't think of it at the moment, so I might come up with it later.
There you go. And I will kind of give a teaser. You had mentioned I had thrown it out there, and then between recordings, it sounds like you're game for talking about. So we'll do a separate series down the road on grief and loss for those that have lost parents early on. What is that like? What's that journey like? And what's that been like for you? And because that's something that, especially in the West, we tend not to do grieving all that well. So that'll be a
Mhm.
standalone series that we'll do.
That'd be good. Yeah, because it's such a different topic as well. I mean, of course, it impacts you as a father, of course, but yeah, I think it's deserves its own series for its own episodes.
That's right. Well, Reed, thank you. Thank you for your time, and we'll let you get back to being a dad. And
Thanks, Joe.
we'll plan on picking it up at this point in the not too distant future when it works for our schedules. And so we'll just kind of keep going, however many parts this will take, but hopefully very practical suggestions for dad. So thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be recording with you.
There you go. And we'll see you on part 3.